All right. Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. And if you can, in the chat, make sure that you can hear me. I don't want to have any tech problems. All right. And if you do have any, all right. We do have a question coming in. All right. Cool. All right. So my name is Chris Berry. If you haven't been on one of these, I do these weekly wisdom workshops every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and then they're recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So you can always watch at a later time if you miss one. And I do invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. And depending on if you have notifications or not, you can be notified when we have new information. And I always like to start with a positive focus. The name of the YouTube channel is Castle Wealth Group, by the way. I always like to start with a positive focus, something positive that happens over the previous week. And my positive focus is that my kids, we won our first soccer game. So I get to coach their soccer, and I have my dad as my assistant coach, and he was my coach when I was playing. So it's cool to get a win. It's actually my first win as their coach. So that was pretty exciting. All right, a plugin. All right, I have to install another plugin before I can share my screen again. Technology, it's fun, except for when it doesn't work. But now it's working. So again, if you do have questions, please make sure to submit them. I really only have 2 questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then I saw another question just come in, so we'll get to that. So hopefully you can see my screen. Yep, you can see my screen. All right. So the first question that was submitted is, and again, this is general information. If you want to see how it applies to you, let's set up a time to chat. So the first question is, I have a standalone retirement plan trust with the Secure Act that just passed last year. And I just do one trust for all of my assets. So a little history on this. And again, a lot of our conversations have to do with regards to taxes, because that's one of the biggest risks and biggest opportunities right now. So the concern was, all right, I have this large IRA or 401k. And for a lot of people, this was their largest asset. Maybe this or the house is the largest asset. And so when we leave it to kids, we don't want them to like spend it all the money right away, or we don't want them to have to pay all the tax right away. So in the past, instead of leaving it to children, we would leave it to a special type of trust, a retirement plan trust or a standalone retirement plan trust, but basically a specific trust set up specifically for retirement accounts. Because retirement accounts, whether they're IRA or whether they're a Roth, they're what we call qualified accounts. There's some type of tax qualification that goes with them. And so initially we would do a separate trust for those qualified accounts if we didn't want to leave it outright. A big advantage, especially for traditional IRAs, is that we could do a stretch. We could do what's called a stretch IRA. And the IRA would be protected for the lifetime, and it could stretch over a lifetime. The taxes would have to be paid over time, but we could stretch the taxes over a lifetime. Well, when the Secure Act passed, that killed really the stretch IRA. Now, all the taxes and anything, if you're inheriting a qualified account, all the taxes have to be paid in 10 years. So that really defeated the purpose of the standalone retirement plan trust. And now typically what we're doing, depending on the situation, like if we have, maybe it's a second marriage or something like that, typically we would just have one trust where all of the assets, no matter what they are, kind of go into one spot. So if you have 401k, if you have Roth, if you have non-qualified or just like just a brokerage account, if you have real estate, typically now we're really looking at the trust kind of as a funnel where everything just funnels into this one trust, and then we distribute the assets however we want to our beneficiaries. And we can still maintain the 10-year stretch and everything on those qualified accounts. So I'm a big fan of simplifying unless there's a reason to complicate. And so these days, even if we want to stretch out to the full max of 10%, we're typically using just one trust where all the assets will go into that one trust. There might be other reasons why we might do a different type of trust or multiple trusts, but typically stretching out the IRAs for the next generation. We're past that point because of the Secure Act that really killed off the stretch IRAs. So if we had a standalone retirement plan trust forcing the stretch, now it's kind of pointless to have that. And so we'll just have that one trust. So that's the first one. Second one, and this was a general, it was a question that came in, and I really, I kind of changed it a little bit. And a lot of times I'm talking to people about as they're close or in retirement, and the world is different when you're in, there's kind of two phases. We have our accumulation phase versus, I call it preservation / distribution. And really it's based on kind of life cycle. Like these are when you're in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, and this might be, all right, I've accumulated wealth, now I want to protect it. What do I do? Right? And some of the concepts are the same and some are very different. Like when we're typically during accumulation, we're willing to take on more risk in terms of how we invest things. And typically when we're in preservation or distribution, we're typically a little bit more conservative in terms of how we invest our assets. But I was actually interviewed today, and this was one of the questions they asked, interviewed for a news program. And one of the questions they asked was, what are the differences in terms of accumulation versus retirement? So what should someone in their 20s or 30s or 40s be doing in this pandemic in terms of saving their money? And the biggest thing is just save as much as possible, right? It's all about accumulation. And so a couple of things I laid out was, first of all, always take the free money. So if your employer offers a match, always take that free money. That's money just sitting on the table. If you're not taking the free money, you're really missing out. Second is set up automatic saving, right? So as you have a paycheck coming in, make sure with your bank or financial institution, have them come, as soon as that money comes in, have them take a percentage and just put that into an investment account or savings account. Third, don't pay penalties and don't make mistakes. So if you do have a 401k, maybe don't take money out of it prior to 59.5 because you might have a 10% penalty. There's some exceptions to that. And then the fourth thing, and really, this is, I think, really one of the most important, and this gets over to the retirement side as well. And again, it's getting back to taxes. It's think about, where are you accumulating your wealth? Which tax bucket are you accumulating wealth in? So think about where your wealth is accumulating. Just even in this past week, as I sat down with people who are now in their retirement phase, they subscribe to the kind of traditional model of having all their money in those tax deferred accounts, right? Those tax deferred accounts, like the IRAs, 401k. Client I met with right before I hopped onto this, all of his money, other than about a certain portion in checking and savings, all of it was in a 401k at this point. And then we have our tax-free buckets, which is the Roth, cash value life insurance, IUL, or some people call this LIRP, life insurance retirement plans, 529s, all savings accounts. So really this fourth one of, okay, let's say you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, still working, 50s maybe, still working, you're accumulating wealth. Okay, always take the free money. Maybe set up automatic savings plans. Don't pay penalties, but think about where you're accumulating that wealth. Maybe we shouldn't overfund that 401k, right? I see a lot of people that put in more than just the employee match into that traditional 401k. If we're saving money, think about diversification. Maybe we should be lowering the amount that's going into the traditional 401k and maybe look at putting money into a Roth or putting money into cash value life insurance or putting money somewhere else. So I've sat down with a lot of people, even this last week, that now they're in retirement or about to retire, and all of their money is sitting tax deferred. And now we need to figure out strategies to move money to Roth or IUL. A lot of times 529s or HSAs aren't appropriate at this time. But if you're still working or you have children that are working in the workforce, maybe have a conversation with them about where are they saving the money. It's very easy to just overfund that 401k over above the match, but being intentional is going to set you up for a much more tax diverse retirement. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to focus on is diversification. And think about tax diversification. And while you're accumulating wealth, you can think about where are you accumulating the wealth. If you're already in retirement, we can talk about strategies to move money from one bucket to the other. And there's different strategies that we can involve. So those were the two questions I had prepared or submitted ahead of time. Another question comes in. With all the talk of increasing taxes on corporations and wealthy individuals, I just read an article that put forth the need to overhaul the tax system and suggested a VAT type of reform. How would how would that change all of the advice you have been suggesting? Well, so the question is really getting into what happens if they change the tax code. I had a longer conversation with the client today, and we talked about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and everything there. We had an in-depth conversation about where taxes might be going, and he talked to his CPA, and he's working with a big wirehouse, and they're against Roth conversions right now, even in the tax bracket, where because of even last year you didn't have to take RMDs. That was an opportune time to do a lot of Roth conversions. So, like, what if there are tax changes? Then we're going to have to pivot, and we're going to have to pivot with those changes. And so one of the things I was going to talk about today, just because I didn't have a lot of questions coming in, is that I was reading the Wall Street Journal this morning, and maybe we're reading the same articles or looking at the same things today. But even today, Biden, in a chat question comes in, one of the final outcomes of Biden's proposal read capital gains and step up base returns. Should we decide on what tax and estate planning tweaking is needed? Yeah. So the laws are always changing, and so I look at it two ways. One is what are the tax laws now? Okay, and then two, where might they go? Okay, because a lot of these things right now are just proposals, and like Bernie Sanders' proposal with Biden, lowering the estate tax to $3.5 million. To answer Nikhil's question, and I appreciate the questions, yeah, we're going to have to change our estate planning because of that. Right now, for estate taxes, estate taxes are at $11 million, and they're set to drop to $5 million. That's just part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That is what we have right now. Okay, where might it go? And this is where we read the tea leaves. I don't know how to put this. I don't make decisions just based on a proposal, right? We kind of saw the Secure Act was coming, and if we go back to prior to 2020, we thought the Secure Act was coming. Really, I think since probably 2018, it was just a matter of when. So we were very confident that that was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. So we're already having conversations about, okay, well, if they do push back the RMD to 70.5, 72, and now we can't do stretch IRAs, what are some of the strategies? We were very confident that that was going to happen. Some of these proposals are overhauling the whole tax system. I'm so busy spending time either working with my clients or looking at the proposals that are maybe on the 5-yard line versus maybe the 50-yard line. So we are forward thinking in how we're looking at things, and that's why we're talking about things that Biden has proposed. So one of the things that he's proposed and might get traction is now that estate tax is dropping to potentially $3.5 million, according to one of his latest proposals. This is the Sanders-Biden proposal. And the thing is that there's certain things, and this is really what it's all about, is taking advantage of the opportunities. Okay. So this is why we've been talking and almost ad nauseum on a lot of these webinars, is especially with taxes. Taxes are a huge risk, but there's windows of opportunity. We know the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act runs from 2018 to 2025, unless Biden repeals it or President Biden repeals it sooner. Now, could they extend it? Maybe. They might go that way. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act might be extended, but I don't see that necessarily happen. I don't put a lot of faith in that. So we are looking at both of these, but I put a lot more weight on where the tax cuts or the tax laws are now, but I do keep an eye on where things are going in the future. And I could easily see them lowering the estate taxes. In terms of an overall tax reform, I don't necessarily have any advice at this point on that, other than just some of these proposals. And here's the big thing, and this is kind of what I was getting at, is even today, I read in the Wall Street Journal that the president proposed a $1.9 trillion another COVID or pandemic bill, another $2.3 trillion infrastructure. And again, I'm not trying to get political. I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm just looking at the facts of these are the proposals. This is the spending. And then this one is like throwing salt onto the wound. $80 billion to go to the IRS to help enforce the tax regulations. So just in one day, in 2020, we were at $22 trillion in debt. Okay. After the pandemic and with everything else going on, we're approaching $30 trillion in debt. And so the question is, what are we going to do? Are we going to print more money, what's going to lead to inflation? Are we going to lower our spending? Well, I don't see that happening. Or our tax is going to go up. So I was just taken aback this morning when I read that. So yeah, I think taxes are a big risk, big opportunity. With some of the proposals of Biden, with getting rid of capital gains and the step up in basis, I had this conversation with clients and potential clients like 4 times yesterday of looking at your tax buckets, figuring out how much do I have in the taxable bucket, how much in the tax deferred and then tax free, and then developing strategies to try to move as much as we can to the tax free. Or if you're accumulating wealth, how much to save. So that was, let me answer this question. Does your firm offer full service package to provide and or oversee all the services? Need to employ transfer something like a one-stop shop that include legal, and other. Yeah. So the question is, what do we do? And I had a conversation with a potential client right before I walked in. First option is we can help you with a piece of the puzzle. So maybe you want us to put together a trust. Maybe you want us to look at long-term care, or maybe you want us to look at manage money. We can help you with a piece of the puzzle, or we can help you with a whole puzzle. And let me see if I can pull up the right one. So really at the end of the day, and this is where our firm started. We started with just building in that legal structure. But what we found is that all of this is, the green doesn't really show up well. We'll do pink. So we started here, our firm. So I started as a practicing attorney, and then in 2008, we started adding these other additional services. Everyone needs some type of legal plan upon death, whether it's a will, whether it's a trust, It really just depends on your situation. And then for my clients in retirement, the big thing is income. How are we going to create that income? Is it going to be through Social Security? Is it pension? Is it drawing down our assets? And then from there, and this is the big risk, I think right now, is taxes, right? And we've talked about why. Yep. And then another big risk is long-term care, healthcare, right? And then wealth management. And there's firms that all they do is just manage investments, right? These are some of the brokerage houses, that type of thing. And then these are some of like additional things, like thinking about legacy and what is your goal in terms of your planning. My pen's not working. But long story short, yeah, to answer your question, yes, we do legal, financial, and tax planning all under one roof where it's coordinated. And for a lot of the reasons I've shared, that's why we try to coordinate everything, because the type of legal structure we're going to create is going to help determine whether we want to do Roth conversions. Because if we move the money into an asset protection trust, then it's not going to be in a Roth. Or if we're looking at maximizing our legacy, what we're leaving to the next generation. I was meeting with a client the other day. They had an estate tax issue. So the first or the easy answer would be to do Roth conversions to get more money out of those pre-tax accounts, do the Roth conversion, and now it's income tax free to the next generation. But they also had the estate tax problem, and Roths are not estate tax free. Roths are income tax free, they're not estate tax free. So instead of doing Roth conversions, looking at where taxes are and where taxes might go, maybe it makes sense to look at a different tool. In this case, irrevocable life insurance trust that can pass estate and income tax free to the next generation. So again, at the end of the day, the way we work with people in terms of legal, financial, and tax planning is figure out what is their goal, what are you trying to accomplish? Let's develop the best strategies, and then and only then do we pick the tools. So yeah, to answer the question, it is one-stop shop. We can help you with a piece of the puzzle, or we can put together the whole puzzle. Another question, what are the necessary estate docs that someone would need? So really there's, first, we have what we call disability documents. So we have a financial power of attorney. So that's a document appointing someone to make financial decisions. Then we have a medical power of attorney who's going to make medical decisions. And then we can also have a personal care plan, which outlines long-term care decisions. So we have those 3 disability documents. Then we need to figure out what is our plan upon death. And really, we're looking at 2 different documents. You might have a will. A will, all it does is gives instructions to the probate court, or you might have a will and a trust. A trust avoids probate, can control the distribution, and we can build in some additional protections, whether we're protecting from long-term care costs, we can do that with a trust. Whether we're protecting our beneficiaries from a divorce, we can do that with a trust. Whether we're protecting against estate taxes, we can do that with a trust. So it's not like a trust, you need a certain level of assets to do a trust. It's all about what are your goals for that trust. What are your goals, and then figure out if a trust makes the most sense. And it's not tied to your assets. I had a client, they had $4 million, and we did a will-based estate plan. I had a client that had a $50,000 and a house, and they wanted to protect that. And we did a castle trust, an asset protection trust. So it's really just about your goals. So typically the legal documents most people need: a trust, a will, financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, maybe a personal care plan. And then also if you own real estate, and this is something a lot of people miss, I'd say 9 times out of 10, when a client comes in and they've done some planning on their own or elsewhere, a lot of times they miss the real estate. They haven't deeded the property to the trust. Even the individual or I sat with today, he just had a will done and there was nothing done with the real estate. So if his goal was to avoid probate and he passed away right now, prior to coming into our office, then that his 2 pieces of real estate are going to end up going through probate. So it's, again, figuring out what are the goals and then picking the right tools. Is there an income limit before you can start a Roth? What are the So the question is there an income limit before you can start a Roth? So there's two ways to get money into a Roth. One is a Roth contribution, and that is where there is an income limit, and it's a moving target, roughly about 190,000. Well, let me take a look. I have it right in front of me. For a Roth, it's going to be 208. Yeah. So the bottom is 198,000. If you're a married couple making less than 198,000, you can contribute to a Roth IRA. If you're making more than that, it's going to be phased out. And once you get over about 208,000, you cannot contribute to a Roth. Now, the other way to get money into a Roth, and this is the way that most of my clients do it, is they do Roth conversions, where they convert the money, where they move the money from the traditional IRA, pay the income tax, and now they have it over in the Roth. Roth contributions, there's no income limit. You can convert as much as you want. You just have to pay the tax on it. Do you have to leave the Roth account alone for 5 years before you can use it? Ideally, yes. There's different 5-year rules, and we've went over those before, but typically when you do a Roth conversion, there's certain exceptions. You don't want to touch that conversion for at least 5 years, depending on your age. If you're doing a Roth contribution, you don't want to touch that for typically 5 years from when you convert the money or when you do the contribution. Typically, it becomes like an academic question anyways, because a lot of times that Roth account is going to be the last money that you would want to touch anyways. You want to take advantage of that tax-free growth. Is there a third way, backdoor Roth IRA? Yeah, so there's different names to these different things, but really a backdoor Roth IRA is still a Roth conversion. Okay, you're contributing to an IRA, and then you're converting it over to a Roth. A backdoor Roth IRA or a backdoor Roth IRA is, even if you're over the income limit, you can contribute to 401k or IRA and then just do a Roth conversion in that same year. A little bit complicated. There's a couple pitfalls you have to watch out for. But yeah, backdoor Roth IRA is basically contributing to an IRA or 401k and then doing a Roth conversion. Really, at the end of the day, there's two ways. You can either contribute directly to the Roth or do a Roth conversion, and a backdoor Roth IRA is just another version of a Roth conversion. All right. I manage our finances and accounts using Quicken. We have several auto payments, including monthly balances and credit cards. My wife has her own checking account, but relies on me to alert her when the balance needs topping up. How do you suggest we help her manage her checking account and auto payments if I'm no longer around to help? So if I can summarize that question, a lot of times with a lot of my families, we'll have a married couple where one spouse kind of manages everything. And the other spouse maybe isn't the financial person. In my household, my mom, she has a finance MBA. She's the one that balances the checks, manages the finances in her house. My dad was a professor, very intelligent, but just managing the money wasn't his thing. And we see this a lot of times. It's one spouse kind of handles the finances, maybe one spouse doesn't. And so a big concern is what happens if that spouse that manages the finances gets dementia, which I've had before, or that spouse who manages the finances were to pass away. How's that survivor spouse going to kind of manage everything? And this is not to plug our services, but this is one of those things where if we are helping you with the legal, financial, and tax plan, whether it's us or someone else, they can be that bridge. So it's almost a partnership with that one spouse who's really managing things where, okay, we're going to work together. We're going to pick the portfolio together. Here's how we have the assets structured together. But then when that spouse that manages things passes away, then that advisor can be the person that helps that surviving spouse transition, can be a bridge, if you will. So we would have to dig into kind of all the different things that we have set up. And that's why sometimes I have, not to pick on my engineering clients, but I do have a lot of engineering clients, and working with they'll come in with their spreadsheets and everything. And if it's hard for me to follow what you're doing, imagine how it's going to be hard for your spouse who maybe isn't in the spreadsheet world to manage things. And I'm not saying that you need to change what you're doing or anything, but just because you understand it your way doesn't mean your spouse will, or doesn't mean your kids will. That's where someone in like my position, or someone who holistically advises you on legal, financial, and tax, and they do this for a profession, they're going to be in a better position to understand your 15 different spreadsheets versus just leaving it to a spouse, right? So hopefully that was helpful. Please discuss irrevocable trusts and high cost of taxes on an irrevocable trust. Can taxes on irrevocable trust be lowered by distributing earned income, then the beneficiary pays less tax? Yeah, so I had I had this conversation even today. So if you look at the tax brackets, and if you're interested, just email our office and I can send you our key data for 2021, which I reference this multiple times per day. Just reply to the invite to the webinar. I have it sitting right on my desk because I like try to memorize all these different numbers. They change all the time. But if you look at the bottom, marginal tax brackets, to get to the top marginal tax bracket right now, which is 37%, a married couple would have to have over $628,000 worth of earned income. So you need to make over $628,000 before you get to that top tax bracket where you're paying 37%. Now a trust, if you keep the income inside of a trust, the trust is going to get to that top tax bracket at $13,050. Okay. So like I had a conversation, and I'm referencing kind of the same situation, but they have an estate tax issue. And so we're talking about carving out $2 million to move it into a family inheritance trust, to remove it from their estate for estate taxes. And we have this window of opportunity. And so if we had $2 million generating income, we're going to get to that top tax bracket in the trust pretty darn quick. So one of the things typically we'll do is we'll distribute the income out of that trust to the beneficiaries. And now the beneficiaries can claim it on their own income tax. So I would say 98% of all the trusts that we've set up do not pay trust income tax. There might be some, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but I would say 98% of the time we're distributing the income where it's taxed at a personal income tax rate, not at a trust tax rate. All right, any other questions? So I answered all the questions that came in ahead of time. And then I don't see any other open questions. So if you do have any questions or if something was unclear, please let me know. All right. I don't see anything else coming in. So yeah, I'll just leave it with what I saw this morning, just looking at some of President Biden's proposals, another $1.9 trillion going to the pandemic, potentially another $2.3 trillion going to infrastructure, $80 billion going to the IRS. So that's spending. And so on the other side, he's talking about tax cuts and I know, again, just looking long term, I see the government spending more money than it's bringing in. And so I think there's a very good argument to say that taxes probably are not going lower than they are now, that they're going to either remain the same best or go higher in the future. And so again, I can't stress it enough. I think the biggest risk right now is tax risk, not only income tax risk, but also estate tax risk if you have a larger estate that would qualify for that estate tax. Because think about it like this, if it does drop down to $3.5 million, that's where the estate tax drops to. Anything more than that might get taxed at 40%. That's not even counting income tax. So if you have an IRA of $4 million, you leave it to the kids, it's getting taxed twice. Not only do they have to pay the income tax on it, but right off the bat, anything greater than that $3.5 million would be a 40% estate tax too. So again, think about tax buckets. We're looking at, we know where the tax laws are now. We're watching where they're going in the future. And there's legal. So what type of trust should we use? There's financial. Should we be invested in a Roth? Should it be in cash value life insurance? Should it be in a brokerage account? As well as obviously tax concerns. So all these things link together, and that's why we do this type of holistic planning. Look, another question came in. Whoops, here we go. More on irrevocable trust. Would trustee distribute earned income? There's different ways that we could structure the irrevocable trust, but a lot of times we do have the trustee distribute the earned income. So let's say there's $100,000 in the trust, it goes up $10,000. That would be taxable income. We don't want that taxable income to stay in the trust. We distribute the $10,000 to an individual who then would pay the tax and walks away with $8,000. So yeah, typically we would distribute the income out of the irrevocable trust. All right. Okay. So with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful week. I appreciate all the questions. Make it a great week, and we will have this again next week. And please invite anyone that you think would benefit from this. And if you do have questions, feel free to always reply or send in those questions just in the subject. Maybe put Wednesday Wisdom webinar. And with that, thank you so much.